I finish up our notes first, and then take our quiz at the end of the hour. So those of you that watched my video yesterday, anybody notice anything that I learned how to do? I learned how to edit. And if you haven't watched it, this is a hint that you probably should, because as I told Johnny yesterday, I might start adding things in there, like if you respond to this video before 3 o'clock, bonus points.
Oh.
There you go. Which means you have to watch it. Well, why is that not fair? You're supposed to watch it. What?
I watch it. It's not 3 o'clock.
Okay, maybe I'll change it then.
Do it.
Okay.
Yeah, Miss Norris, I'll be honest, I watch it.
Oh, I know you.
I watch it as late as possible. The last thing I do.
Okay.
I make
Well,
sure I'm
I'll just do that then. How about if I do this? If you watch it before 3 o'clock, you get so many bonus points, and then the later on in the day, the cost of it's called economic and it's called opportunity cost, diminishing returns. The later you wait, the less you get, because in all actuality, people, you're supposed to be doing this during the school day.
Yeah.
So we'll just keep it at that. All right. So if you watched yesterday, we ended with the legacy of compromise. And again, the significance of compromise should not be lost on you. It is something, not going too deep into politics, that is lost in politics today, the art of compromise. It's an essential part of government, right? It's an essential. You compromise every day or you would have no friends. Correct? Correct. Some of you are better at compromising. Some of you are always the compromisee and never the compromiser. But it is a necessary part of getting through life. Compromising. Everything is a compromise. Government is a compromise. However, when we compromise on issues that are so profound, like the institution of slavery, instead of these men elected into these offices to solve these problems, all they're doing is kicking the ball down the road. And that at this point is all we're doing with these compromises, is we're just kicking the ball down the road, because ultimately the United States and the people of the United States are going to have to deal with the fact that they enslaved human beings. And when we talk again about this issue, I do want to make really clear that when we start with our abolitionists are about abolishing the institution of slavery. We are nowhere near the ideas of equality, equal opportunity for people of color. It is just the abolishment of slavery. So the baby steps that the nation has to take to embrace its we the people kind of attitude will take a while. So please make sure you understand that compromise of 1820. It's essentially important. It is a compromise on how to deal with slavery. It's a compromise that kicks the ball down the road, and it will kick the ball down the road until what's going to happen. Even though you might not already know it, but what do you think is going to make it happen again? When we have another state that wants to join the Union and we don't have a balance. Oh, you can put them in that box right there. You didn't have to have them today. Right, that one right there.
When do you need them?
Not till next Friday. I was just coming around in case you had them in your room and you wanted to take them out.
It was such a hectic week.
Yeah, so keep them. You can keep going. But I just didn't want you to have to store them in your room. We'll pick them up for good on Friday, next Friday.
Yeah, we'll keep working on it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thanks, Mrs. Lewis. All right, so now we're going to shift gears and move into some judicial cases. These judicial cases are important for establishing quite a few things. I will try to direct your attention to the ones that are really important and not so much the ones that are just here necessarily so you can watch what happens to John Marshall's Federalist Court. So here's the important part. John Marshall, most important Chief Justice in the history of the United States. I don't think anyone would say anything different. And here's what you need to know about these court cases that will make all of them really essentially easy for you to figure out. Is John Marshall is a Federalist. He's always going to rule in favor of Federalist policies. He's always going to rule in favor of business. He's always going to rule in the favor of economy, banks. He's always going to rule in those ideas of a strong central government. Any of those Federalist policies, which you should refresh your memory about, John Marshall's court is going to rule for that side. Again, his most significant case is Marbury versus Madison. And A2, his decisions greatly increased the power of the federal government, right? Federalist policies were enacted to create a strong central government. So the nitty gritty of all of these court cases, because there's a lot that we're going to fly through here, is not as important as just understanding the rulings, why the court ruled in the way it was. And again, this is the lasting legacy of any president, is the number of people they're allowed to put on the bench. Strengthen the federal government, check the excesses of popular elected state legislatures, examine cases from a federal philosophy, and found legal precedents to support his Hamiltonian views. And that, again, is what will be the overriding feature of John Marshall's court case. On Fletcher versus Peck, the significance is B2. The court ruled that the Constitution forbids states from impairing contracts. So this is one of the earliest examples of the court exerting its rights to invalidate state laws. So this is a case about land, river, usage, and what the court says is that states cannot get in the way of contracts. Contracts are legal. The same as Martin versus Hunter at the top. The issue, did the Supreme Court have the right to review decisions of state Supreme Courts where federal statutes or treaties were involved? And the significance is, yes, they do. The significance of Martin versus Hunter is upheld the supremacy clause of the Constitution, and that the federal judiciary had supremacy over the states. Again, significant. If we're talking about something current, and again, I don't know how much you guys pay attention to what's going on, but in the last 4 days, states have been taken to the Supreme Court about their voting policies and their voting laws and their voting regulations. And the reasons that the United States Supreme Court can oversee that is Martin versus Hunter, that the Supreme Court is the supremacy part of the judicial branch, and they can oversee state laws. Probably the only one that you will be asked anything about on a test, and I would put a box around this one, is McCulloch versus Maryland. This is kind of the same as Marbury versus Madison. Students get mixed up with this one a lot because they both sound the same, Marbury versus Madison, McCulloch versus Maryland. They're both M's. Marbury versus Madison is judicial review. And McCulloch versus Maryland is declares that the Bank of the United States is constitutional within that necessary and proper clause. So it takes until 1918, till Hamilton's already dead, for someone to say that the Bank of the United States is constitutional. So remember at the beginning, that was the problem with Jeffersonians and all that, the bank's not constitutional. McCulloch versus Maryland says, yep, it is. And again, it is a giant blow to states' rights. Denied Maryland the right to tax the bank. Dartmouth College versus Woodward is the protection of property rights from states. Cohen's versus Virginia, a blow to states' rights. Supreme Court had the power to review decisions of Supreme Court. Again, all of these are, you should see in a secession, is the federal government asserting its power and its authority over states. And we're changing that balance. Jeffersonians don't like this, and even though we have killed the Federalist Party, there are no longer people part of the Federalist Party. This is the longest lasting Federalist policy on the United States. Gibbon versus Ogden. This one you do have to know. This one will come up. So of all these things that we just went through on page 6 and 7, the only ones that I have ever recalled seeing on any test is McCulloch versus Maryland and Gibbon versus Ogden. This is called the Steamboat case. Again, it's a blow to states' rights, but here's the significance. Oh, hello. What? Hello? Hey. Yes. Sure. Randy, you have a phone call. All right. So the significance of Gibbons versus Ogden. This is called the Steamboat case. This is about. I'll wait till you're done.
Hello. Yeah. All right, I got him. All right, thank you.
Did you win a prize?
No.
Okay. So here's why this is important. The ruling is only Congress had the right to regulate interstate commerce. Interstate commerce means business transactions that cross state lines. That is not, at this time period, going to seem like a really big deal. What is happening is New York and New Jersey are trying to monopolize river travel. And each of them are trying to axe each other out. And what the Supreme Court says is the only people that can regulate interstate commerce is the federal government. It's guaranteed under the Constitution. Why is this important? Because in 1964, this is what's going to end segregation. This is the beauty of court cases in the Supreme Court, that they rule on something insignificant as steamboats that's going to have a dramatic impact in some other area. And the way this happens is that Congress can regulate interstate commerce. So what Congress will do in the 50s and 60s is put in place regulations that businesses that do participate in interstate commerce can be regulated. And that regulation can include you cannot segregate your business. You cannot have a policy where every African American or every Black person that enters your business has to do it through the back door. You cannot regulate that any African American or Black person that comes to see the movies has to sit in a balcony. That's the way they can do that. There are hardly any places that can do business without crossing state lines. Dairy Queen, if they buy napkins from Illinois, they have to follow regulations of the federal government. It is impossible in the 20th century even to do business and not cross interstate lines. So Gibbon versus Ogden shows up again as this regulation of interstate commerce, which in 120 years is going to have a huge impact on the end of segregation. Daniel Webster, important influence in Marshall's decision. Daniel Webster is a Federalist, even though, again, that party's going to die. He writes a lot of John Marshall stuff. We had a little bit of foreign policy, which, again, we are not still very good at. We'll start with foreign policy after the War of 1812. The Rush-Bagehot Treaty during Madison's presidency will limit naval armament on the Great Lakes and really kind of set a boundary finally between Canada and the United States. And we'll talk about that again with President Polk and why we have that really nice following a parallel line. If you look above Logan and Morgan's Head of the United States, why we have one nice little line across the United States and Canada, because but it's not yet. We'll get there. Treaty of 1818. This is John Quincy Adams negotiating one of the nation's greatest Secretary of States. And here's where we are going to fix that Canadian border at the 49th parallel. So the Treaty of 1818 gives us that 49th parallel. and share and finally kind of end our thoughts of ever taking over Canada or doing any of those other things. The next thing we're going to look at is the Florida Purchase Treaty, and this is again John Quincy Adams, hidden in page 8 just because we're going to look more at this later. John Quincy Adams is one of the greatest Secretary of States in the history of our country. Now, this is interesting because John Quincy Adams was also a president. John Quincy Adams was a better Secretary of State than he was a president. Just saying, for reals. United States had already claimed West Florida. What is the issue, again, still is Florida is owned by Spain. Florida still becomes this place that slaves can escape to be free. And Southerners are really getting really upset by that as well. So Indians, runaway slaves, white outcasts are going to pour into that border and attack settlers and then retreat to the south in that part of Spain. So Monroe orders Andrew Jackson to attack the Indians and, if necessary, pursue them back into Florida. He was to respect all Spanish posts, but he doesn't. So Jackson's going to sweep through central and eastern Florida during the First Seminole War. He captures Spanish cities, deposes the Spanish governor, 100% disobeying orders, which is punishable by court-martial or death. Because Finn, you want me to shut that blind?
Oh, it's all right.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. He's going to execute American chiefs or Indian chiefs. And John Quincy Adams convinces Monroe's cabinet to offer an ultimatum to Spain. Either control those outlaws or give us Florida. And that was pretty big of him to do that. Spain realized it could lose Florida forever, and so they sit down to negotiate. And this treaty, the Adams-Onis Treaty or the Florida Purchase Treaty, I always knew it as Florida Purchase Treaty. I don't know if the College Board will use either one of them, but this one is what makes one of the things that makes John Quincy Adams such an important Secretary of State. Spain cedes Florida as well as Oregon. We get Oregon. And we're going to give up claims to Texas, but not for long. We're going to come back. So at the bottom of page 9, we have why John Quincy Adams is the best Secretary of State for a very, very long period of time. Now, John Quincy Adams is James Monroe's Secretary of State, and I have mentioned this a whole bunch of times. Every Secretary of State becomes the next president. So John Quincy Adams is setting himself up. I'm Secretary of State. Next job for me is president. That's going to happen, but it's not going to be good for John Quincy Adams. So John Quincy Adams writes this thing called the Monroe Doctrine. Anybody ever heard this before? It's very important. It's really important foreign policy. It is zero important at the time that it's written. And again, this is one of those things that in the time period of which it's written, the Monroe Doctrine really doesn't do anything. Why? Because we don't have any power behind our words. On the foreign policy scene, we are still trying to find our way, and we're not really good at it. When we get to the beginning of the 20th century, this Monroe policy becomes a policy of the United States. It becomes not only the policy of the United States, but it becomes a global policy for the United States as the United States steps into the 20th century as an economic superpower. But what the Monroe Doctrine essentially says is European monarchies see this new democracy in the United States as a threat to their absolutism. So they see the only way to stop that is to renew their colonial territories and take those colonial territories and kind of do like what happened to the colonies in the United States after salutary neglect and re-amp up this absolutist control that they have over them. They see democracy as a threat, and they sought to restore newly independent Latin American republics back into Spain's rule. Americans say, oh no, that is not a good thing. We are trying to kick out Europe from any place in our hemisphere. At the same time, Great Britain now wants us as an ally. Why? To protect its interest in Latin America. So Great Britain, who is really, really good at foreign policy, now says, hey, United States, we want you to be our ally. And we, unsuspectingly so, said, awesome. Great Britain secretly is saying, if we get the United States as an ally, they can do our dirty business in Latin America and take care of Spain, and we don't have to do that. That's why Great Britain is good at foreign policy. That's why we are not. So in Secretary of State, so number 4, Secretary of State John Quincy Adams believed that Great Britain wanted an alliance to keep the U.S. from taking Latin America and jeopardizing Great Britain's territory. Believed the alliance would hamper U.S. expansion and was unnecessary. Realized Europeans could not really impose a threat to the region. So John Quincy Adams writes the Monroe Doctrine. And this message is read by James Monroe in his annual Congress. So he's got a message to Congress. He has to read it. This is what it is. The President's annual message to Congress warned Europeans, colonial powers could keep existing in colonies, but you cannot have new ones. Leave America alone and let these new republics govern themselves. Talking about Russia. Nationalistic Americans, yay, this is awesome. However, we are getting ready to throw one of President Washington's final decrees, get out of entangling alliances, into the wind. So we are essentially saying what the Monroe Doctrine says in a few short words is Europe, stay out of our hemisphere. This is our hemisphere, stay out. We have regulated ourselves or relegated ourselves to the protectors of this North and South America. Problem is, we have nothing to back it. Not yet. And so that is why British reaction mixed. Can't really do much. Monarchs are offended. Why would you say that about us? Immediate impact of Monroe Doctrine is very, very small. We do not have an army. We do not have a navy. And if the parts that we do have are very, very weak. However, long-term impact. Monroe Doctrine became the cornerstone of foreign policy during the last half of the 19th and throughout the 20th century, thus making John Quincy Adams one of the most significant Secretary of States in U.S. history. He sees the convention giving us our Canadian border. He gets Florida from Spain, and he writes the Monroe Doctrine. And again, those things are essential. And the reason John Quincy Adams is given this distinction of most significant is those 3 things begin to solidify what it means to be the United States of America. Securing that border, getting rid of the threat in Florida of Spain, and then trying to establish foreign policy and a protectionist kind of view of ourselves and our hemisphere. And essentially that's what we become in your textbook says the last part of the 19th century, but not really. We still don't have the ability to back our words with action, but definitely by the beginning of the 20th century, we have those words backed by action. All right? Questions about any of that before we take our quiz? All right, people listening. The secret code word is compromise, lowercase c. All right, questions, anyone at all? Okay. Please don't forget our test is on Monday. I hate Monday tests, but this week really meant we needed to do that. All right, folks listening in at home, I'm about to cut us off. Have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. And again, hope you have a very uneventful quarantine.